My name is Aodán Enright, and I'm here today to support Ruairí. So, Ruairí is the founder and CEO of Adelia Learning, and Adelia are a global provider of EMCC accredited courses, um, training both individual and, or sorry, providing both individual and team coaching accreditation, amongst many other things. I also work on the Adelia faculty and providing some design and development and delivery services as well for the gang. So we have a very interesting conversation ahead. Before I introduce Ruairí, just to set some expectations, really this is about taking a few minutes at this lunchtime just to contemplate a question that is probably at the front of all of our minds, even if we're pretending it's not, about how do we continue to work successfully with our coachees and clients in this moment of turbulence. So with further ado, I'd like to introduce Ruairí Ó Ceilleachair. Off you go, Ruairí.
Yeah, hello everybody. Look, I love these summits because you get to meet other coaches from all over the world. So we're going to try and get you guys into breakout rooms really quickly. But what we're interested in at Adelia, we know a little bit about how people learn. We're trying to learn more about it, which is why we're really interested in today's talk. We meet a lot of clients who are under pressure. They're in situations where they just have to drive on with their life, and yet they're under an awful lot of pressure. And we're really interested in that idea of how do we do that, and how do we turn all this. There's so much public propositional knowledge now available to us. We have no shortage of knowledge and materials and stuff. But turning that into personalized wisdom and how we structure courses and how we structure our conversations with our clients so that we help them to develop their personalized wisdom, which allows them to function in the world. We're really interested in that, and we'd love to hear your ideas on that. And that's what we're about today. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion after the breakout rooms.
So I guess this is very much a discussion, right? So what connects virtually all of us on the call today is the challenge of assisting our clients, whether in a coaching or mentoring capacity, to navigate through these challenging times, I guess. So what Ruairí has selected a couple of questions that are useful, I think, for us just to press pause and reflect on, because these are the kind of questions where the answers often change, right? So sometimes there's almost universal answers to some questions, but then through changing geopolitics or technology or how society and cultures change, sometimes our answers to these questions can change. So the first question that we were going to zoom out today and spend some time thinking about is, what are the main sources of pressure for your clients? So when you're working with people in whatever context, what do you think are the main sources of pressure for them? And most interesting possibly is, how is that changing? Okay. And then the possibly more challenging question is, how are we coaching people to thrive under this pressure? How are we in our work facilitating people's ability to stay in the game when things are coming at them in a way that we mightn't specifically choose, let's say, but can't necessarily control? So how are you coaching people to thrive under this pressure? So those are the questions that we're going to invite you to explore in your breakout rooms that Nicola in a minute or two will be firing you into those. Rory, before we send people off into the ether to explore those, and by the way, I should have said, if you have your smartphone handy, just do a quick screenshot of that, so just so that you don't forget your questions. Rory, any perspectives that might help guide us as we explore those questions as you experience it right now?
Well, I suppose the key point for us, Aodán, is we all have lots of answers when the pressure's not on. But what we're really interested in is, in the heat of the moment, how do we equip people to stay on task, to not feel overwhelmed? Because we don't always have the luxury to do a 20-minute meditation session or, head off up the mountains. We have to get on with life, and we're interested in, and as you know, we do a lot of work with high-performing people, but there are so many people who are high performers day to day, everyday tasks. People are under pressure, and we're all vulnerable to this. We are all vulnerable to becoming overwhelmed, and we've had a lot of success with one or two approaches that we can share later, but this is an area we're particularly interested in, and we'd love to hear your ideas, which is actually in the breakout rooms, guys. If you could, you're going to meet somebody in the breakout room now. They could be your friend for life. So this is exciting, but please try and get somebody to record the main takeaways so that when we get you guys back, we can all learn from each other. So thanks, Aodán.
Well, guys, I hope you've survived the process of discussing those interesting questions. So what we're going to do now, just to broaden our discussion, is invite you to pop something into the chat, something that you have picked up from your discussion, and especially something that you might have learned from one of your colleagues that you feel is a useful perspective for us maybe to share or unpick a little bit further. So I'd invite you just to capture a few things possibly now into the chat. And as I say, I might invite, with Nicola's permission, I'll name someone possibly, and we can maybe just hear from you. So I'll be just fascinated to hear what you might come up with. And just as you're doing that, just to kind of set the context, let's kind of put away this idea of being expert in this question, and maybe just to explore our role as people who are also trying to learn what is useful for us as coaches or mentors in this context. Okay, whatever it is, we are open to learning. Super. Okay, now, so I see the chat is filling up with a lot of fascinating stuff. Okay. Okay, now. Yes. So there's a very interesting point that has come up, Nicola, if we talk about, it's from, I see Daisy Corfield. Maybe that's, we can start with Daisy, possibly, if that's okay, Daisy, with your permission and with Nicola's unmuting, if that's okay.
Hi
How
everyone.
are you, Daisy? You introduced a couple of interesting concepts there, but also especially this idea of identity as it applies to how people are experiencing struggle and so on. But
Sure.
so unpack that for us a little bit, please.
Yeah. So we had a great conversation. Each of us work in very different spaces. So tech startups to the third sector. But what we noticed, the key theme or key kind of pressure that's being felt with our client base is around demand versus time available. So huge demands on people's time, lots of pressure, lots of things to do. You need things done yesterday. a lack of prioritization, and just not enough time in the day. And so we explored that, and some of the suggestions or things that we might do with clients are around getting them to reflect on what's the most important thing or things in their life, and maybe challenge the concept of work being the be all and end all, because if it's already pressurized and yet it forms such a key part of your identity, that can add even kind of more pressure and lead you to do things to the extreme. So try to fit more into a day to meet those challenges, because it's so key to your identity that you are successful and that your job, you know, does serve you well, and that you're good at your job. So we reflected on, you know, thinking about the other areas of your life and how to maybe draw your attention more to those areas and see what that does with maybe your work schedule and the pressures you're feeling there. Your basics like time management, prioritization, structuring your day. But the key thing we kind of tapped in was sort of challenging sometimes the importance level of things, and looking at what's in your control and what's not in your control, and learning to let go and take a bit of a step back and not be so be all and end all about, in this setting, work as the example.
Super. Daisy, thank you so much for contributing that. There's a couple of big things that have bubbled up straight away there. Ruairí, if I might ask you just to come in and comment. And one was this idea of being or raising our awareness of what we can control and not control. And also there, for the second point, which we can possibly get into in a minute, is this idea of this almost, there's a tension when we're we're high performing, between like what that is, the impact that's having on us in terms of staying in the game, but also this attachment to the identity of I'm a high performer, therefore I must, which is also a thing that can cause interference. Ruairí, possibly on the first point, do you have any perspectives that might be useful for us in terms of how the things we can control and not so?
The first thing I'm looking forward to is harvesting the chat. The chat is just full of really interesting stuff. So super. This idea of, and we get to it, you know, of control the controllables, and, you know, focus on what we can control. And most people get to that stage. What we're really interested in is, how do I do that? You know, the point about attention and where's my attention is an area that we're very, very interested in, and how you coach people to notice where their attention is, and how you coach people to use the power of that to be able to, in the heat of the moment, put their attention back on staying on task. It's the scenario of I'm taking the kids to Dublin for a day out, and I have a plan. I have a contingency if I get a flat tire. I've got the jack, and I've got the spare wheel and the whole business. But how do I stay calm enough that if I do get a puncture and it's raining and the kids are screaming, that I'm not throwing half them out the back window? You know, that how do I stay on task? And that's the part that I'm really interested in, and we have some ideas on that as well. And the other thing that comes up is the distinction between anxiety and pressure, because I don't know about you, but I'm meeting so many people who, there seems to be an anxiety epidemic. And of course, it's back to our attention. Young people in particular, their attention is constantly being diverted onto things that are really, really important. You know, there's a lot of things happening in the world that are very serious and very important. There's, you know, the war in Russia, there's the tariffs, they have spots. You know, there are really huge, important things happening in their life, but most of them are outside their control. And how do we help them to develop the skill of, well, how do I get my attention back where it's useful? So that's my reflections on that. And as I said, we'll introduce one or two things.
So yeah, actually, while you're on that topic, Rory, if it's okay. So what are there a couple of moves that we can make, or like, have you any specific advice for us, but also something that we can use that would help people even in that moment of stress or overwhelm with the flat tire? Are like, what can we do in that moment? What are useful moves that we can make, whether they're physical, mental, or whatever?
Well, I'm actually reading through the chat, and it's a theme that has come up in the chat quite a bit. But there's this one I think with clients. One of the key things is many of our clients believe that staying calm under pressure and being able to stay on task is attributional. That, you know, pick your parents a bit more carefully next time, because when the pressure is on, you always get in trouble and you start, you know, you just lose the head. And they feel it's attributional. And when we dig into performance and performance training, we use the basic performance triangle, the structure, skill set, mindset approach, which is a very common approach. And we'd use it with all our performers. Structures are easy. We kind of know how they work, and skills, we kind of know how to get better at skills. But mindset is like a voodoo science. It's like a deficit model kind of a thing. Somebody's have problems with their head, you send them to some kind of a shrink or something. But we view that as a skill. And here's the difference, we think, with this approach. The idea that if you view this as a skill, then the great thing about that is I can learn the skill. I can learn the skill. And of course, the bad thing about that is I've got to practice it. And this is the thing that's often left out. You know, I read a book on how to be cool under pressure, and if it ever happens, I know what to do. No, if it's a skill, I have to be practicing this. And we have to build this into, you know, how we work with our clients and help them to get better. So, and the skill is around control of attention. And we do a lot of work in helping people to do that. But so that's kind of our approach on that. And it's something that's coming up in the chat a lot, and there's some really good ideas I see in this. But yeah, Aodán, there my thoughts on that.
Okay, super. That's something we might come back to again in a while, just in terms of what might help us control our attention in that moment.
Aodán, could I just even say something there too?
Hey, Shawnee, how are you?
Yeah, good. Even maybe just learning a wee bit from sport. You know, if you think that attention, the task in hand, and even the Paul O'Connell statement about, you know, play the ball in front of you, and trying to stay present. So maybe you know, our self-talk, you know, having your self-talk at that particular time, and maybe having a go-to statement or a go-to, you know, picture or something, again, to keep you present. And if you take the sort of resources v demands and the challenge and threat theory around, you know, not focusing much on the demand's the demand, but focusing more on your resources. You know, number one, your internal resources or what you have, and then your external resources and your support around you. Who do I go to at that particular time around my external support that'll help me, like? And so it's having the people around you in that time of pressure. So it's a combination of your own internal and external to deal with the current demand, and not focusing on the demand at all. So maybe just some wee things there, like.
It's very useful. Shawnee, Rory, would you like to respond before I bring in Suresh?
No, again, that's exactly what we're interested in, Shawnee. And having something that is accessible in the heat of the moment is the challenge here. And which is why, and I've heard you speak on this, the idea of having something physical to allow you to ground yourself and to refocus and to zoom out and get some perspective. Because when we're under pressure, the first thing that goes is perspective. You know, how are you doing? Oh, it was a disaster. Or how are you doing? I was brilliant. Well, the truth is it's neither, because it's never all or nothing. But perspective goes when we're feeling overwhelmed and under pressure. So we often need, and sport is a great example, because many high performers have physical ways of refocusing, of anchoring themselves back, of getting themselves back on task. And we find the red to blue system incredibly useful for that. It kind of plays a major part in pretty much all the training we do, whether it's developing leaders or training coaches or helping sports people or musicians. We find that system incredibly useful. Thanks, Shawnee, for that. Great to see.
Thanks, Ruairí. You might be able to give us a kind of a quick 2-minuter on what you mean by the red to blue thing in a while. But Suresh, if I can invite you to come in. Sorry, you've had your...
Shawnee was the lead in our group with Milton, and I think he posted the comments which are really what we talked about. The range of people we have, you know, they can be young students to the elderly. So it's just wonderful, and everyone comes with a set of issues. And I think it's just amazing because I heard, you know, the mindset being mentioned, and actually sometimes I'm really careful about using words. And lately I just came across someone saying, you know, for people to be coachable, they might have a fixed mindset, and that's bad. But you know, I think that really struck me. What's wrong with them? You know, maybe the word mindset is itself to be questioned. Yeah, why not outlook? Because a mindset is the mind is set, and that's sort of a negative connotation. It doesn't matter. You can have an open mindset, closed mindset, and maybe that's the word. And I think that's really interesting, because if you look at people having whatever outlooks they have, this is where you can tap their energies. And I'm a firm believer in appreciative inquiry, ikigai. The more, the merrier in terms of fusing between the East and West, or, you know, different cultures. And I think it's just fascinating from what I've seen in the chat, really a lot. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suresh. That's an excellent example. Ruairí, if I could ask you just to comment on the choice and use of specific words. Suresh's example of even the use of mindset evokes a particular boundary around what's possible. But also in terms of just our coaching work, Ruairí, maybe are there kind of words or frames that we kind of jump to that may not be as helpful as we thought they were, or whatever? Maybe you might have an example of something like that from your own practice.
Yeah, you have me thinking now about using the word mindset ever again, because outlook, yeah, it's just shows the power of language, really, doesn't it? And one word means one thing and to another. But I love that perspective. The outlook gives me a chance to, well, I just take a different outlook, and that's so good. What I'm trying to dig into with this, and what I run into with clients is, if performing under pressure was a written exam, most of my clients would actually pass. You know, they'd score really well, because we know we're supposed to focus on the controllables. We know that. It's just accessing that when we're feeling overwhelmed or under pressure can be really an issue. Let me just remind you guys of, like, you know, you're all experienced coaches now, and you're very familiar with this whole idea, but like it often comes down to simplicity of say the performance equation. You know, that our performance is our potential minus the interference, and of course the source of that interference is invariably internal, inside the performer. And when I talk about performance here now, I'm talking about somebody teaching a class, or somebody trying to mind some kids, or, you know, trying to cook a nice meal. We often get in our own way. And of course, Tim Galway, who he was in Dublin actually just before COVID, and the inner game of tennis, he you know, we'd be familiar with his work. But transferring that into our daily coaching practice and helping people to deal with the day-to-day. It's a useful, simple idea. And, you know, this is the core issue that we're dealing with. Where is my attention? And for us to develop this skill, it does involve us helping our clients to recognize what the skill is, and then to develop practice routines that so they can practice it. And most of us are very familiar with the three circles. Covey, somebody mentioned Covey earlier. The ideas of what are the things I can't control, what are the things I can control, and what are the things I can influence. Working with clients and just getting them to do that exercise with you, or asking them to do it as homework, can be incredibly useful. And this tool, which is at the heart of the Red to Blue system, this tool is something, like all tools, that the more we use it, the more we practice with it, the better we become. But the key point here about recognizing when we've got diverted, accepting it, and then putting our attention where it's useful, that is at the core of the Red to Blue system. The idea of how do I embrace the pressure? Because we have to come to terms with, we have to accept the fact that if we're going to perform at a high level in our day-to-day work, in front of 1,000 people, in front of 8,000 people, or there will be pressure. There is no such thing as high performance without pressure. And how do we make sure that doesn't become anxiety or overwhelm? And this is the really interesting part of, you know, helping clients to perform when there's very high pressure. And is how we do this. This is what I love about the Red to Blue system, because it's immediately accessible. It was designed so that you didn't need a degree in psychology to be able to apply it. And if it doesn't pass the accessibility test and the practicality test, then it becomes something very interesting maybe, but not useful to me when the kids are crying, it's raining, and I've got to change the flat tire. So pressure and performance, pressure drives performance, and coming to terms with that, and finding ways of understanding where is our attention, am I diverted, how do I get back on task? That's the area that we're particularly interested in. Sorry, Aodán, I've gone off on a slideshow there. Beg your pardon.
No, thank you. And that's actually one of the things I had hoped that you would kind of drill down on. What I'm noticing in the chat, guys, is that one theme that's running through, and there's so many wonderful things. What a great suggestion that Nicola has to download the chat and review afterwards. The wisdom is in the room. But this idea that I see from a number of contributors that clients are telling me that they're feeling more this, they're feeling more that. But I guess the dilemma for us and the tension there is that no matter how the overwhelm increases, or that sense that comes at us, we still need to remain solution focused, and that we can't just opt out, whether as coaches, mentors, or as people, whatever role that we're in. So it is really about negotiating our way through and using whatever tools or approaches help us stay in the game. I think that's what I keep noticing. Now, Linda has been patiently waiting to come in with a question. So Linda, we're almost out of time, but we'll certainly check in with you, Linda, please.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would like to hear your thoughts, Ruairí, on the next question. When working with people, I'm a psychotherapist also and a coach, so that's where my question comes from. I think in dealing with anxiety, there is a fine line between coaching and therapy, and I would like to hear your thoughts. How do you defer the difference, and when would you refer a coachee with anxiety-related problems to a psychotherapist?
Okay. Well,
thank you.
We should get that done in a half an hour, no bother.
You've only 2 minutes. Keep going.
Okay, so really quickly, what I love about coaching is we we never diagnose, right? I just love that. It's so freeing. And if we find ourselves diagnosing, then we're not coaching. We might be helping the people, but we're not coaching. So I like that. And you're right. We're not really, this is going to sound facetious. It's not meant to be, but really, where are you now? Where do you want to go? And how do you get from A to B is kind of all we do. Pretty shallow stuff. We don't really care how you got to where you are. It's in the sense that it is not within our remit to even dig into that. If you were locked under the stairs when you were 7, sorry about that, but I'm not, I'm a coach. So I don't dig into that stuff at all. So when do I refer? Anytime I feel, hey, I'm on my depth here, like this. So yeah, that's a very short answer now, but that's my initial reaction to that, Linda. I hope it's a help. And
It has been
I
very.
wish I knew more about psychotherapy.
Sorry?
I wish I knew more about psychotherapy. At least I think my wife thinks I wish I knew more about psychotherapy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very enlightening. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. That's obviously a question that we could spend a lot of time, and we'd have all manner of different competing perspectives, I would imagine, on that question. Laura, I'm also conscious that you've had your hand raised, and you may have the last question of today's session. Go ahead, Laura.
So I better make it good then.
Yeah, no pressure.
Okay. No, I'll be short and sweet. Just to say that in situations like this, I have used, there's some neat NLP tools like the anchoring. It can be very useful in the moment, again, to, kind of pulls on sports psychology and visualization. So really get them to go back to a moment when they were, feeling calm, confident, and then, as we all know, associating it with a physical stimulus, that in the past has worked really, really well, and people have enjoyed the process. And I saw something in the chat as well, which actually resonated with me. The drama triangle. I think that's really useful as well.
Yeah.
Victim, persecutor, and the rescuer, and then just reminding them, okay, just get back to the adult mode. And I use that myself, and it's incredible. Not just that shift. It gives so much power to an individual to just remind them that they have the resources and they have options. So yeah, I forget who mentioned it in the chat, but I liked it. I thought it was worthwhile reinforcing.
Laura, those physical anchors, absolutely. I mean, we've done a small bit of work with one of the British Army units, and they used to have this thing. It involves asking yourself 7 questions to kind of get back on task. Now, if there's live bullets flying over your head, you don't have time to be like taking out your book and asking yourself. You need something immediate, and it has to be something that you've practiced. You don't have to know why this works for it to be useful. And very often people just need something that works for them in the moment. And there are lots of really useful NLP techniques. If the clients aren't practicing them, then they're of no use to them in the heat of the moment when they really need it. And that's often the missing piece we find. But yeah, thanks, Laura.
So I'm conscious we've reached the bottom of the hour, as my American colleagues would say. So, Nicola, we may have reached the end of our session. That said, before you get into further networking or exploration, thank you all for your contribution. I really enjoyed some of the perspectives that came in, just interrogating some of Ruairí's angles and some of the suggestions that came up. Ruairí, if I could just invite you just to possibly give us, no pressure now, a pithy summary of some of the things that have come up for you as you've been here, listen to all the questions that have come in, that seems most front of mind or most important for you now based on this.
Yeah. I can't wait to read the chat, right? Because there's personal opinion, but I think this is, for me as a coach, it's the key issue. How do I turn all this knowledge into something useful for the client that they can actually, when when all about them is falling apart, that they can hang on to something. And one of the things that we feel is very important is equipping them, the perspective that this is a skill. It's not about who my parents were. I can learn this. I'm not helpless here. But because it's a skill, I've got to be practicing something, because I'm not just going to be able to call on it. It's not life is not a written exam. It's so building that into how we interact with the client and encouraging them to find something that they can rely on in the heat of the moment is, I think for me, it's a very important part of the practice.
Super. Ruairí, thank you very much for your contributions, and from my perspective, thank you to all the coaches. I feel almost inadequate in such a room of great perspectives and experiences, and I guess that's the value of gatherings like this, is just reminding and grounding ourselves that we're in a community of practice, that we can always learn from each other. Thank you so much, guys. Nicola, back to your
Thank you.
Your good self.
I shall get the microphone baton back from you. It's been such a fantastic conversation. As I said earlier in the chat, it's been the highlight of their day. It's just been opened up so many insights, I think, for all of us. But thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's been the right conversation at the right time. So thank you so much, Ruairí and Aodán, for leading this amazing conversation.